Oops. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to our 47-day virtual summit. I'm Leah Thoms from the marketing team, and I'd like to welcome you to our workshop today. Today is all about shortening certificate lifespans, how to prepare for TLS certificate lifespan changes, steps to formulate an action plan, and walk away with a custom toolkit to bring back to your team. For this, I have Tim Callan, Chief Compliance Officer, and Nick France, Chief Technology Officer, here for you today for a keynote. And after that, we have Brendan Bonner, Global Director of Sales Engineering, and he'll walk you through a practical workshop. This presentation is being recorded and we'll share it with you following the session. We will also share the custom toolkit we're going to talk about with you, so you'll be very well equipped. If you have any questions during the presentation, send them our way. Please use the Q&A function and we'll answer as many as we can at the end. Quick jump into the agenda. We'll start with 47-day certificates, what, why, when, and then move over to certificate automation and agility. We'll discuss how 47-day strategies can align with quantum-ready certificate strategies, and finally into a timeline to shorter certificates. Now, before I hand over, I'm going to pop a short poll into the chat, and we'd love to hear how many certificates you and your teams currently manage. If you can guide us, please answer, and we'll come back to the question a little later in the presentation. But that's enough for me. Over to you, Tim and Nick.
Thank you, Leah. How are you doing today, Nick?
I'm good, Tim. Thanks. How are you?
Good. So let's start with what's going on with the reduction, the march down to 47-day certificates. Next slide, please. Oh, and I see the poll. The poll should be up, so you guys should be able to see that. So the today you can have a maximum public TLS cert of 398 days. And this has been the result of a gradual decrease over time. If you went back in time 7 years, that was 3 years. And so certificate lifespans has been going down, and it came to 100. And then the next step in this process occurred a couple years ago in 2023, when Google kind of threw down the gauntlet to say, this is Google Chrome, to say, we would like to see 90-day maximum certificate lifespan. That led to a lot of dialogue in a lot of places, and that went on for a couple years, terminating in a ballot in April of 2025 that was originally sponsored by Apple, authored and advanced by Apple, that would actually reduce the maximum term ultimately to 47 days. We are coming up on the first of those reductions, where maximum lifespan will drop down to 200 days, which is a lot of what's motivating this. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this is what the reduction looks like. As I said, maximum certificate term today is 398 days. But it's important to point out that actually other things are being reduced too. So the maximum length for a public SSL certificate is getting shorter. Also, the DCV reuse period is getting shorter, and we'll explain what that means in a moment. And then the OV reuse period is getting shorter as well. So let's just define these. I'll start with the OV reuse because we can talk about it once now and then sort of leave it alone for the rest of the presentation. That is the amount of time that a CA can rely on the validation it does of your organization's identity. So if I own Tim's Bank and I'm going to get a certificate, this is the CA confirming that it's actually Tim's Bank, right? And there's various methods that we do that. And the point behind reuse periods is, let's say I go get another certificate tomorrow or in a month. It's not deemed necessary for the CA to go through that whole thing again. So a reuse period is defined. And within that period, the CA can rely on the first validation that it did, right? Today, that is set at 825 days, a little over 2 years. And that will actually be reduced to 1 year, 366 days, coming up with the changes of these. If you're a Sectigo customer, this is irrelevant because we do this every year anyway. And we also do this really without you having to be involved in any meaningful way. So this is part of our procedure. We do this. We'll keep right on doing it. Your life isn't going to change in any meaningful way. So let's just set that aside. But that is one of the changes. Certificate term, maximum term. This is the maximum amount of duration that a certificate can be issued for. And then lastly is the DCV reuse period. And this is similar to OV reuse in terms of if you validate a domain, and there are certain prescribed methods that we can use to validate that you actually have control of that domain. That's why it's called domain control validation. Then within that, the idea again is if you come and order another cert in an hour or a week, it shouldn't be necessary for us to do that again. We should be able to allow or issuance ordering of multiple certs. But again, the period of time that's sitting here now seems to be too long. And so that's being reduced over time in order to more closely marry actual proving control of a domain to ownership of a cert for that domain. So before we get into the term, Nick, I know you have some thoughts on the DCV reuse reduction.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I think usually when we talk about this, I like to make sure that people understand, as you've explained, what it means, but also how it's something that's often overlooked when we talk about this. So the whole concept of reducing the certificate lifetime was something that was fairly well publicized, and most people seem to have a grasp, as we'll see in a bit, that what's changing and understand that lifetimes are going down. What's often missed is that this DCV reuse period is going down. And whilst most enterprises and most businesses for all CA customers probably do this about once a year today and go through the process of proving that they control their domain names, having to do this all the way down to 10 days, which, if we're honest, is more likely to be on a weekly basis to have a little bit of room to account for any errors, you are going to have to build out some automation for this. Your PKI teams and your certificate teams are going to have to get very, very friendly with the people who manage your DNS and your domain names. And it's something that is often overlooked, but is just as critical, because if you don't have the domain name validated, you cannot get a certificate issued for it. So it's important to realize that as well as looking to deal with how your organization handles shorter lifetime certificates, they're also going to have to look at how to perform these domain verifications through things like DNS and potentially email for a limited time, but how they can do those much more frequently than they already do today.
Yeah. And then the last one, and note that drops down to 10 days at the end. Now, the other thing to look at here that's worth looking at is that the DCV reuse period is matching the certificate term, right? Today it's 398, 398. March 15, 2026, 200, 200, 2027, 100, 100. But then when we get to 2029, when the certificate term will drop down to 47 days, the DCV reuse period at that point will break with that and will go all the way down to 10 days. So that's an important difference just to note on this. And then we do see finally the certificate term is dropping. So today it's 398 days. If you look at these numbers, you go, well, these are funny numbers. What are these numbers? Here's how to think about it. 398 days is a little over a year. It's a year and a month. So it's a year plus some wiggle room. And that wiggle room is valuable. Like, let's say that a certificate is supposed to get renewed and for some reason that doesn't work and somebody figures it out the following Monday. It's nice if you didn't have an outage and an expiration in that time period. So wiggle room helps with that. Or let's say you want to do an early renewal. It's due to be renewed on November 24th, but that turns out that's Thanksgiving this year. So we want to renew it a little early and nobody has to work on Thanksgiving. Okay, fine, right? We've got the wiggle room. We can do that. And that's how the wiggle room helps us. So 398 days is a year plus some wiggle room. 200 days is 6 months plus some wiggle room. So in that time frame, imagining that you're putting your certs on a 6-month cadence, where, if I'm renewing it on a certain day in February, then I'm going to renew it on the same day in August, right? 100 days is 3 months plus some wiggle room. So now imagine I'm doing February, May, August, November. And then 47 days is 1 month plus some wiggle room. So when we get down to 2029, the vision is that basically we're all on a monthly renewal cadence with our certificates. And that's what we're doing. And if you want to do that the same day of the month, or let's say, I don't know, the second Tuesday of the month, that's something that you'll figure out. And the wiggle room gives you a little bit of tolerance there, right? So you can come up with something that's going to work well for the organization. Note also that though this is an annual step down, there's a 2-year gap between 2027 and 2029. And that's because both of these last durations are short enough, 1 month for the cert renewal, 10 days for the DCV, that there's a sense that that's where really a fully automated kind of implementation is necessary for most organizations. And we'll get into this, but we think starting in March 15, 2026, we don't think many organizations are going to be completely automated. We think there will still be some manual processes. They'll just be doing them twice as often. When 2027 rolls around, you may still have a few manual processes, which you'll be doing 4 times as often, but it's only a few. But by the time you get to 2029, you really kind of need to have no manual processes. And so that's why everybody was given an extra year to make sure that we're really ready when those days roll around. So this is a key chart. I wanted to give it enough thing, but these are the essential days. The last point I'll make on this is these are CA Browser Forum rules. These are not negotiable. There is no, there are no, what do I want to say, delays or suspensions, or nobody's going to get a chance to get more certs of longer term after these days. These are hard deadlines, and these deadlines CAs can't violate. Do you want to add anything,
Exactly.
Nick?
No, I think you made the right point at the end there, Tim, is that these are industry guidelines, they're fixed, and any CA could potentially violate them. Sure, you could issue a 1-year certificate in March of
And then
2029.
I'd have to turn around and revoke it.
Yeah, that CA
Right.
would not be in existence for a very long time, certainly not long enough to see that certificate last its entire lifetime. So it's just to make it clear that, and this has been voted on, right? So that's the other thing that we don't always point out, but this was unanimously voted on. There were no votes when this came up in the CAB forum.
Right.
No CA, no browser, nobody said no. There were some abstentions, a very small number, but this was unanimously passed and unanimously agreed by the industry, by browsers and CAs and everybody else represented there. So it is, as you've said, fixed deadlines, and they won't be changing, and they're not movable.
Yep. All right. So next slide, please. So why? Nick, why are we doing this?
Yep, this is the question everybody asks. Why are we doing this? Why is it? And the simplest answer I usually give is that shorter is better. Okay, and it's really the first bullet point here in terms of enhanced security. So if you look at a certificate and you imagine a certificate is being abused in some way, it's been misissued, it does have the wrong details in, it's been given to the wrong person. So if someone has one for a very popular web property, or it's been compromised, like the private key has been stolen, anything like that. Any of those things can mean that what we have to do is that certificate can then be abused for years and years and years. We used to be able to issue certificates for 10 or 15 years. Imagine the abuse potential of something that lasts for 15 years. It's massive. If you reduce that certificate down to 47 days, that's the maximum window of risk, and potentially even shorter in the future. So the idea is that shorter is better. And when we talk about risk and who it's better for, we're talking, certainly from the browser's perspective, about billions and billions of individual users of browsers, of mobile phones, laptops, desktops, and operating systems. It's us. It's everybody that's listening to this webinar is a user, and they are protected by these timelines being pushed down so that any compromise is as short as possible and isn't something that lives for years and years and years. So ultimately, shorter is better. That's the main one. And that's, I think, the main answer to why are we seeing this reduction. Of course, there's a lot of other good reasons, as we have listed on this slide. I think the other big one that we talk about, Tim, is this cryptographic standards one, because cryptography changes. Computers get faster. We'll talk about certain types of computers in a moment, but computers in general get faster and codes become more breakable, or they become within reach of being breakable. So from time to time, we have to change those algorithms. We have to move from one algorithm to another. We have to make key sizes larger. And in doing so, if we have a certificate with an outdated algorithm that is valid for 10 years, that is another 10 years or even 1 year of vulnerability and a security risk. If we can
And
move everybody quickly to new standards, then everybody remains safer. Sorry, Tim.
and the watershed moment on this was when SHA-1 was deprecated,
Yep.
because the community came together and decided, look, SHA-1 just isn't safe as a hashing algorithm anymore. And Cap Forum passed a mandate, and everybody had a year. All the CAs had basically a year to get off SHA-1. But at the time, 3-year certificates were allowed. So the day before SHA-1 was deprecated, CAs were issuing 3-year certificates, or 3+ years. It was 3+ a little, because that wiggle room thing again. And then those certificates then lived on in the ecosystem as valid certificates, non-misissued certificates, more than
For all.
4 years after it had been concluded that this hashing algorithm was no longer safe. And this was an aha moment for, I know, at least some of the people who worked for browsers, who said, you know, this just isn't agile enough. And so, you know, even 1 year, like if we decide to deprecate a standard, we give everybody a year to get off it, and then there's a whole additional year, that means 2+ years later, you can be using something after it's deemed to be unsafe, and the opinion still holds, which is, this is too long.
It is.
Yeah. So that's a big one. And the other thing I just want to point out, Nick, is you talk about these changes occurring from time to time. I very much am of the belief that the pace of that change has picked up over time, and that it will continue to increase moving forward, which means, and we'll get into this when we get to the PQC part, we all need to be cryptographically agile all the time. That's the new
Yes.
normal. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the reasons perhaps it has been difficult for us to do it is because exactly of these long life. And people have been reluctant to say, well, we need to move the standards up, because they know it's so difficult to get those moved out of what is such a critical ecosystem with TLS. So you're absolutely right. We
Yeah.
will see these changes happen more frequently. General computers are getting faster and faster. We have clouds where any person can spin up, you know, with a credit card, they can spin up thousands and thousands of machines with infinitely large capacity of memory and processing power. So we need to have these standards move faster and faster, like you say, Tim. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then the last 3 bullets, let me just kind of hand wave
Put
those
them
all
together.
together.
Yeah.
The browsers really like the idea of universal automation. And I agree with them, right? Universal automation is really good for a bunch of ways. It helps with renewals, because outages due to renewals are a plague on our digital society. It helps with errors. You know, if you have an automated system that you know is going to renew the cert correctly, on time, accurately, with the right cert, install it correctly every single time, that has a lot of value for the resilience and the uptime and the business continuity of all of our digital processes. And so the browsers are not shy about saying, we like the fact that shortened certificates lifespans and shortened DCV reuse period makes automation damn near unavoidable. And so that's another benefit that comes, that you know, though we have to do the work, once the work is done, it will help us in lots of ways.
Well, I think
Next
you're right,
slide.
Tim. Yeah, we also want to just talk very briefly. I mean, automation is obviously something that everybody is adopting across all of our IT, right? Nobody spins up the machines and kind of installs things by hand anymore. Everything is automated, and TLS should be absolutely treated the same. So I think it's
Yeah.
important to know that if nothing else, it's just something that you should automate, because you automate everything else and it makes everything more efficiently. And we have a slide on the gains you can get from the automation a little bit later
Yep.
on, but it's still important to know that it's something we should all be doing anyway, like we automate everything else we do in IT.
Excellent. Moving forward. So, yeah, and let's go to the next slide, please. We can look at this. So, you know, as we get more certs, so one of the things just to bear in mind is that, and I said this earlier, outages and errors and breaches and problems due to certificate misconfiguration or missed renewals is a common thing. So these are just ones that we know about. These are major, major providers of technology. These are the people who should be able to get it right. I'm looking at Microsoft and ServiceNow and Cisco and Ericsson. I mean, these are the people who should be able to get it right. And every incident on this slide is known to be an outage or a failure due to either a misrenewal or another certificate configuration and installation problem. And, if these guys can't get it right, then why do we think that the average medium-sized business that is not a born-in-the-cloud tech provider can get it right? And so this is a thing, this is a problem, and this is a problem that affects all of us. And these are only the ones we know about. Most of the times that there's an outage or a problem, nobody tells you why. So you know that the real answer is going to be it's many more than this. These are just the ones we find out about. So with certificate lifespan shortening and you doing a renewal on a monthly cadence rather than an annual cadence, the risk of this goes up considerably. And again, automation is the way to mitigate that risk. Next slide, please. Let's talk about post-quantum cryptography. So the other thing that's going on, and let's advance, please. The other factor that fits into all of this is, in addition to certificate lifespan shortening, at the exact same time, we are looking at a change to fundamental change to all of the algorithms that we have, right? So quantum computers are a real thing. And instead of bits, they have these things that we call quantum bits or qubits. And qubits are able to be a traditional computer, a bit is a 1 or a 0. Well, a qubit is a 1 and a 0 at the same time. And if that doesn't make any sense, then that's quantum physics, because quantum physics doesn't make any sense. But what it does is it's been mathematically demonstrated that there are certain very hard math problems that become ridiculously easy for a quantum computer. And this is going to benefit society in a bunch of ways. There are things that are really difficult for a computer to do now that quantum computers will be able to do for us, and they're going to give computers capabilities that they simply don't have today, which is absolutely awesome. And that's the reason to drive forward and make quantum computers. Unfortunately, one of those tasks that is ridiculously hard for a binary computer to do that is trivially easy for a quantum computer is break RSA. And another of those tasks is break elliptic curve cryptography. Both of them. So what that means is the cryptography that we use on damn near 100% of the encryption we do for data in motion is just useless, and it needs to be replaced. So the National Institute for Standards and Technologies, NIST, has released a set of post-quantum algorithms. And this is after a 8 or 9 year worldwide global process to determine these algorithms. And these have names. They're called FIPS 203 and FIPS 204 and FIPS 205, or they're called MLChem and MLDSA. And what these do is you can use these algorithms because they aren't easily defeated by a quantum computer. And if we think this is a threat for the future, well, okay, one day there will be quantum computers. I'll worry about it then. The last point to think about is there's a scenario called harvest now, decrypt later, or harvest and decrypt. And basically how this works is, let's say a bad guy gets into your network, right? Part of our defense in-depth strategy is we encrypt everything. So even if they get into our network, they can't do anything with it. We encrypt our data in rest, we encrypt our data in motion, and what can they do? Well, it turns out what they can do is they can grab the data in motion, capture it, and store it. That's the harvest part of harvest now. And then the decrypt part is, in a day in the future, when a sufficiently powerful quantum computer is available to that bad guy, they can open up those data. So this isn't going to happen tomorrow, but it could happen in 5 years, and it definitely will be feasible in 10. So then you start to ask yourself, what secrets do I have that will still be secrets in 5 years. And those are the things to worry about. Like my credit card, I'm not worried about because it'll be expired by then, right? So my credit card number will be of no value to you. But think about industrial secrets. Think about long-term plans. Think about governmental and military secrets. Think about PII or PHI. All of those things absolutely will still be a secret in 5 years. That's the stuff that we need to be worried about. And the solution, unfortunately, the only solution, except have really good security so they can't get those blobs in the first place, is to move to post-quantum cryptography post-haste.
No, I think you're right, Tim. I think you've explained it, excellently as you always do. But I think it's important for people to realize that really this is one of the big drivers of what we're doing. We've talked about shorter being better. We've covered or touched on this at least in this idea of being more agile when it comes to cryptography. But this is the big one. This is the big looming threat. And like you've said, it probably won't happen tomorrow, but it could. And it is certain to happen probably within the next 5 or 10 years. And we don't know. And so we have to prepare.
Are like grabbing these files today, right? The opening won't happen tomorrow, but the grabbing files happened yesterday and a year ago and 3 years ago, right?
These are very real threats. Yeah.
Think of it as a long-term threat that is already underway, right? Where the damage is already done. It's just going to be a period of time before that payload is delivered, right? That's how to think about it. And that's a problem. But what we want to do is we want to prevent more of those little landmines from being planted that will blow up and hurt us in the future. Next slide. And so this means that we're all going to have to migrate all of our encryption for data in motion. We're going to have to deprecate RSA and ECC. NIST has told us to be off of them by 2030. So that's the date. And another important thing to understand, and this has been signaled by NIST and is widely agreed on by serious cryptographers around the world, is we need to move into a new era where our cryptography is constantly being updated. So RSA was invented in 1978. And here we are, and it's nearly 50 years later, and we're still using it. And by the time it is 50 years later, we will still be using it. That is not a thing that will ever occur again in human history. There's no way that you're going to be able to live your whole career or your whole life with the same basic algorithm underneath our digital platforms. That just won't happen. These things are going to be updated on a regular basis. Nobody knows how soon, but I absolutely think no basic algorithm is going to last more than 10 years, and I wouldn't be surprised if we're changing them every 5. And this is just going to be the new normal. This is going to be the life we live. So those of us who have chosen to be IT professionals, you're going to be in a world where you have to have dynamic cryptography. And that means we need to build our organizations and our processes and our systems and our tools to accommodate that.
I mean, I think you said it there, Tim, building something on the idea that we might have to change these fundamental building blocks of security and our organization security as frequently as every 5 years is a complete change from what we're doing. I mean, RSA has been in use since the 70s, right? And it's been in widespread use on the internet, everything since the 90s. And it is the algorithm we all rely on. 30-something years of using that, and now we might have to start rotating every 3 to 5. It's a huge change that we need to prepare for.
And when we were all in college or university, they told us, all right, and you're going to encrypt things with RSA. And we went, okay, memorize that. RSA, it's going to be on the test, right? And then just forgot about it for the rest. That'll be true for the rest of our lives, right? That is no longer the case. That is no longer the case. All right, next slide, please. So adaptability, this is just what I was saying. We can go to the next slide, right? This is exactly the point. Okay, great. You're on this webinar. This probably means you agree with everything we've been saying. What are you going to do about it? Well, there are lots of compelling arguments for automation, and we can look down these. You can see what it is here, right? There is just an agility in terms of switching out certificates on the fly. If you have an automated system and a certificate can be switched out in minutes or seconds, and you hit a button and they're just done, that gives you this incredible power to adapt quickly and move if you need to move. It also has a huge productivity boost. If you go down to number 3, which is instead of you as a human sitting there and doing your installation manually and spending hours for each certificate, you as a human can run a batch process and have the whole thing done in a few minutes. And that gives you as a human more time back to work on other things and better things. So the human productivity aspect is huge. The outage risk we've talked about, but it's just so big. So many people, every time somebody goes down because of an avoidable certificate error, because they didn't renew a cert, or because they didn't install it correctly and didn't realize, that's lost revenue, broken customer satisfaction, business disruptions, possibly SLA fines, possibly other compliance failures, breaches. All of these things occur, and they're avoidable.
And so much of this is really largely common sense, right, Tim? We've used this
Right?
slide before in many occasions to kind of illustrate to people what they might need in order to not convince, but to make a case within their organization for looking at certificate
Yeah.
management and automation, because it does make sense to do. But if you look
Mhm.
at like the first line, if you have people doing certificates by hand today, taking up to an hour. I mean, even in the best case, I've done this for many, many years, and it still takes me a long time to do it by hand. Getting that down to sub 5 minutes, or as we've said in other presentations, it can really be done in several seconds. The
Yeah.
time saving and the impact there is absolutely huge if you put the effort in to do it. So this is really just to kind of give people an illustration of justification, if you like. Not that it should be completely necessary with everything we've
Yeah.
talked about, but the idea of giving what benefits the automation can bring aside from being prepared for these changes, right? What it's going to give
Yeah.
you in terms of risk reduction, time back, productivity, and general security posture as well. So it's
Right.
really useful for that purpose.
And then it's verifiable, it's measurable, it's auditable, it's reportable. And that's number 4, right? Now suddenly you can output a report, and you can give that report to your C-level executive or your board of directors or your auditing firm or your legal department to prove that you did these things and you did them correctly. And that's a benefit as well. Next slide. So what does our action plan look like? Nick, you want to roll with this bit?
Yeah, so this is really our idea of trying to give people a bit of an approximate timeline on what they should be doing and when. Now, we've got the first deadline, as we said before, it's coming up in not that long a time. I mean, mid-March 2026 is not that far away. It is only the first step down to 200 days. So while it is a 50% reduction approximately in the lifetime of the certificate, I think we can all acknowledge it isn't something that will bite immediately. As you said right at the start, Tim, when we were giving the overview, we haven't gone straight from 398 days to 47. This is a step down. But for many organizations, a 50% reduction will mean some pain that they need to prepare for. So what we've tried to do here is illustrate a few of the steps that we think you should be on as an organization, as the person responsible, or at least part of the team responsible for certificates, and where you should be. And the first thing we recommend, and it says October today, I mean, we've done this presentation before, I'm sure with earlier dates on, but the point is the first thing you should be doing is knowing your inventory, know what you have. You can't do anything with your certificates. You can't do anything about automation if you don't know what you have. And Brendan will cover some of this in his workshop and demonstration a little later on. But what we're trying to do is say there are tools available, tools from us and tools from a lot of other vendors to be able to discover and find the certificates that you have and get them under management, know about them, know when they expire, know what you use them for, and that knowledge puts you in the best state of preparedness in order to be able to make these changes and start moving towards automation. So this first slide here is really to say, now, October 2025, this is the time of year, this is the time you should be planning to get discovery in place and find your inventory of all of your certificates inside, inside, outside. As we've said here, things like shadow IT, you might have some admin staff who are going off and getting their own certificates. And you want to be able to get a handle on those and understand where they are and what they are so you can start preparing to automate them. So that's the first step we want people to take around now, as soon as possible, get discovery done and understand the inventory you have. Yep. Next slide, please. So the next step, fall or autumn, as hopefully many of the audience will know it, is you need to evaluate and look at what you can do with automation. Right. Again, we'll talk about automation. We'll talk about it more. Brendan will cover some of the more practical aspects of automation, but this is where you need to start assessing what you can do with automation, what options are available to you. And as we're going to cover in the next slide very briefly, we do have a kind of matrix to help you evaluate which systems you should look at first and where your priorities should be, given the timelines. But what you need to start to do is to look at where you can apply automation. You hopefully will have some systems that can be very easily and very quickly automated using readily available standards and something you can deploy very quickly, low-hanging fruit, as many people call it. There's a lot of options for that. But then there may be some that are a lot more complicated, a lot more difficult to look at. They require more manual intervention, perhaps older systems or more complex systems where that's harder. But you need to evaluate where you can apply automation. And as the slide here thing suggests here, you've got to look at other things. You've got to look at the access control. You've got to look at where this sits in your kind of pipelines. Is this a front-facing website? Is it a web service? Is it some other kind of part of your infrastructure? So he's really looking at where you use certificates and evaluating how you can start to automate them and apply the automated options to the infrastructure that you have. We can go to the next slide, please. I think, Tim, you want to talk about this quite a bit as well, but this is our kind of prioritization matrix.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that March 15th, though it's a very important deadline, we don't want to think of this as the deadline for 100% automation of all of our systems. If you're able to do that, awesome. Knock yourself out. Most of the enterprises I talk to don't think that's realistic. And so what I tell them to do is I say, you want to think about it in terms of this criticality versus difficulty matrix, right? It's a pretty simple, straightforward chi-square, right? How important are these systems? How bad will it be if these secrets are stolen? Low to high. Okay, let's just put them in two groups, low and high. How hard is it to upgrade this? Let's put them in two groups, low and easy. And what you'll probably find, what the people I talk to usually find, is there's a huge tranche of this stuff that can be done very easily. They've got a whole bunch of systems where the environment is consistent, it's heterogeneous environment, it's not any kind of weird use case, and they say, we can do all of this stuff, and we can put automation in place, and we can knock out, I'm making this number up, 80% of our systems. 80% of our certs can be done in an automation that I can get in place between now and March 15th. Okay, well, go do that. And then what'll happen is that 20% that you need to do twice as often, you have room for that because you automated 80% of your systems. And yes, that stuff's twice the work, but you got another year to work on that. And you knock some of that out. You knock, let's say, the next 15% out. Now you're left with 5% of them that you have to do 4 times as often, but it's only 5% of them. And then you have 2 years to get them automated. And that's how I encourage people to think about this, right? And then again, the other part of this arithmetic is if it does go down, how disastrous will it be? If this is the system that's going to literally put you out of business, then maybe you need to bite the bullet and do the hard work and get that automated, even if it's in the hard category, right? But think about it this way, and this is how to prioritize. Don't sit there and say, I have to get everything done by March 15 or the world is going to end. Say, what are the smart choices I can make to do work between now and then? And what's the smart choices I can make to do follow-up work between then and a year later so that my organization adapts to these changes without a major failure. And
I think,
that's
as I
how
say
we
on this
encourage
time
people
one,
to think
Tim.
about it. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was going to say we should use the phrase "don't let perfect be the enemy of good." Don't
Yeah.
aim for 100%.
Exactly
It would
right.
be lovely if everybody could, and I think we'd all like it if every organization was able to automate 100% of their certificates all of the time. Realistically, it probably isn't practical. And I think most people can get close, but if you aim for perfection and then you end up with problems or you come up short, you've caused yourself more problems. So use something
Yeah.
like this, use an evaluation, take everything Tim said, go for the things that you can do easily first, look at those, get them done, and then you have time. There is still time here. We just want you to know that the time isn't very long, but you absolutely still have time here to start preparing and make sure that you are ready for these changes.
And so, Nick, let's take a minute to address. There's actually probably a subsection of hard which is impossible, right?
Yeah.
And this would be unsupported software and hardware, right? Stuff where I can't get a patch or an update from the vendor because they don't do that anymore.
There's
Or
definitely some.
homegrown stuff where we don't understand the source code, we don't feel we can make changes to it, we don't have the source code. We all know that these things exist. Nobody talks about them, but everybody has some of this. And that's the stuff where you're going to have to make a hard choice. You're going to have to say, am I prepared to absorb the risk of trying to do this manually on a quarterly basis or ultimately a monthly basis? And what's the risk of outage versus what's required to go in and do the hard work and replace that system with something that is modern and is current and is patchable and is updated.
Yep.
And the other piece that enters into this is the post-quantum cryptography discussion. Because even if you say, okay, look, I can deal with the monthly renewals, your other problem is you're going to have cryptography that isn't safe. And if you have a deprecated system or source code you can't update, it may also be that you can't use PQC. So now you're going to have to ask the same question there. You're going to have to say, am I willing to live with the risk that somebody is harvesting this? And if the answer is yes, because it's not really very important, because it's, maintenance scheduled for your fleet of trucks, and you just don't know where the attack's going to come from, all right, maybe you decide you can live with it, and maybe that's fine. But if it's your key industrial secrets or the keys to your operation or the things that keep you running, and you can't afford to be down, or you can't afford to have that sitting in an advanced persistent threat's hands, then at that point, you guys may have to make the hard choice and replace those systems and update those systems and buy new software and hardware to replace your old software and hardware that can be modern and can be updated. And I think this is going to force a lot of people to have a reckoning with a lot of stuff where they've known for a long time they shouldn't be doing this, but they've kind of been getting away with it or think they've been getting away with it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big things with this, Tim, is it is forcing people to reevaluate, particularly whether a publicly trusted TLS certificate is actually the right place or the right application in the right place. If you have a system, as you've said, that is so old, it can't handle this, it can't handle automation, it's unlikely to be a safe system. It's unlikely to be a system that should be exposed to the public internet where public certificates are generally used. So it might be, as you've said, that it needs to be replaced, that it needs to be updated. If that's not possible, then you have to reevaluate whether it needs a public certificate. Should it go behind a system that can offload that? Should it not be connected at all? Can it in fact be handled with a completely internal service and you do not need a public certificate? So many of these changes are going to force enterprises or any customer really to reevaluate whether a 47-day public TLS certificate is actually the right use case for what you're looking at it for. So hopefully it's going to help more people look at that and decide whether it is the right thing to do.
All right, let's try to get through this and hand the reins to Brendan. Next slide, please.
Yeah.
So
this is the final one, right? This is basically us
Mhm.
saying, Winter, you've got to get your plan ready. You've got to have a vendor chosen. and you've got to start to plan your implementation. Again, it's fairly common sense. We're just trying to give people a timeline. It shouldn't take you 6 months to do your discovery and another 6 months to determine, what systems I have that can use Acme. That should be a fairly quick process. Then you need to make your vendor choice and start planning your implementation. Nothing too controversial here, nothing too complicated. I think that's fairly straightforward. We're just recommending it get done over the Christmas kind of period, because obviously there's a lot of holiday shutdowns and a lot of other things going on. You need to get it done as soon as possible.
And March isn't going to get any later.
No. So for the final one, we go to the next slide. This is basically testing and training, right? So you need to have your vendor chosen. You know what you're doing here. It's time to start testing it. It's time to start looking at how you're going to deploy this. Training is a critical one that we often overlook and we maybe don't mention as often as we should, but you need to make sure everybody is aware this is happening. Hopefully you're, as an attendee of this webinar, understand these changes or are learning about them now. There may be a lot of people on your team that aren't aware this is happening. So you do need to make sure that your internal teams are trained. They're trained on what to do about getting new certificates, how to set up the automation, and they're ready so that when March rolls around, which, as you said, Tim, isn't going anywhere, that you are prepared and everybody in your organization that touches certificates and PKI is prepared for that first step down in March.
Right.
Okay. So I think the final
Yep.
summary here from us, Tim, is really just to get ahead, right? And start doing the automation, start making sure you have monitoring, start making sure you have your audits. Everything should be ready in place so that certificate management doesn't fall off the radar again. You don't want to be the next organization on that slide with, it sounds like great people to be with Microsoft and Starlink and the rest. But that is our kind of slide of shame. That is the people that have had or caused outages due to mismanaged certificates or expiries that they've forgotten about. You don't want to be there. Prepare for this now. Start to make sure that certificate management is something you have a handle on and are ready for, ideally by mid-March of 2026.
All right,
Great.
take it away, Brendan.
Thanks, Tim and Nick. Yeah, we're handing over to Brandon here. He's going to talk you through a 5-step readiness plan. We'll talk about best practices, a framework to get you 47-day ready, a practical execution checklist, and then also a variety of support tools. But before I finally hand over, let's jump back to the poll from the beginning. Around 35% have fewer than 50 certificates. 50 to 250 certificates, 30%, 17% have 251 to 1,000 certificates, and 13% have over 1,000. So you can see it's quite a wide variety of certificate amounts. But yeah, handing over to you, Brendan.
Yeah, thank you, Leah, and thank you, Tim and Nick. Tim and Nick will stick around, so if you do have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A in the Zoom down below and ask those questions. So yeah, today I'm going to go over the 5-step guide of becoming 47-day ready. Next slide, please. And step one, kind of what Tim and Nick were describing, is that first step is awareness and discovery. We want to get a understanding of what inventory you have out there with your certificates, what those certificates are doing, and like how can what are the kind of the problematic certificates with that slide that Tim and Nick were showing. What certificates can we knock out quickly for automation? Which ones are going to cause the business the biggest problem? That's what we want to find out in step one here. And we're going to go over some tools to help find your certificates. There's some free ones that Sectigo offers that we couldn't show you, and then there's processes that you'll want to do internally as well. We don't really talk about MTLS too much, but it is an issue that is out there today. That if you have using public certificates for mutual TLS or authentication between 2 different entities, those are gonna be an issue in the future as well. We want to move those from public to private, so we want to identify them quickly as possible and remove them. So yeah, step one is that awareness and discovery. Next slide, please. So after we've done step one, we want to do vendor and application mapping. So we know our certificates are on this IP address and port, and then we want to identify is it like an IIS machine? Is it a web server? Is it a cloud service? Is it a firewall? And we want to understand what potential automation paths that we have for those systems. So we want to get our certificates, get our inventory, and then map them directly to the application that they're utilizing. We want to figure out who owns these, especially I've seen quite often with in our customers. There's a whole announcement about this. Short-lived certificates. We have to talk to our application team. We have to talk to our network team, and we need to inform them. But we also figure out like how they deploy their certificates today. So we need to define that clear ownership. So that's the first thing we want to do is discover, then map, and then we can go on to the next slide. So what I've kind of seen is kind of some issues that customers have run into when they're coming up with a plan for this 47-day certificate in quantum is they have some kind of misunderstanding, some mistakes that they're creating when they're looking at CLM. So myth number one is my CLM is already automated. I've seen quite a bit of my customers that have issued certificates through CLM, but it's only through a manual method. They're just requesting certificates through the CLM, and then they're installing the certificate manually on the end device. And that's not true automation. True automation would be certificate deployment directly to the end device. We need to get to a point where we're trying to automate as many certificates as we can directly to the key bindings of those servers. So just because you have a CLM doesn't mean you're ready for 47-day certificates. Myth number two, centralized key management is not automation, or doesn't equal automation. Similar to kind of that first one, we've seen a lot of customers that we have a key vaulting system, maybe like an Azure or a HashiCorp or something of that nature, and they're getting the certificates deployed to a central location. But then the app owners and the application owners and network administrators, they have to go and grab the certificate from the key vault and then deploy certificates directly to the end device. We're still manually installing certificates directly to the end systems. So we need to not do that. And we want to, again, get to full automation to the end device. And myth number three is probably the one that is the most perplexing, is automation takes too much time and effort. I think a lot of customers understand that they have automation tools available, but they think it's just too much of a burden to set up and get up and running. And in fact, it's quite not the case. And I'll show you kind of in the demo later on. I actually can deploy certificates with automation faster than I can manually deploy a certificate, and I've done this for years now. So it's a big myth that automation is too much time and effort. It really is simple, and we'll show you some ways to do it. Next slide, please. So as we talked about the automation mapping and PQC readiness, we want to get a list of all of our domains. As Tim and Nick had mentioned, DCV is a shorter live, or is going to be shorter lived as well. So we want to get a full inventory of those and map them to some kind of automation process. There's a few free ones like with Acme, and you can do DCV automation, but you also have tools like Sectigo Certificate Manager, which can do DCV automation as well. And then you want to start looking at your inventory of your certificates. What I like to especially talk to my customers is arm them with as many tools as possible to do certificate automation. You have Linux administrators and Windows administrators, and they're both great at their jobs, but they operate very differently. And so a process that works for a Windows administrator probably doesn't work for a Linux one. And so it's about having as many tools as possible and coming up and mapping those directly into those. Next slide, please. So this is Sectigo Certificate Manager. This is some of the true enterprise grade, the enterprise automation that Sectigo has. We have certificate protocols. We have network agents. Sectigo has 50+ integrations into most of your cloud, firewalls, load balancers, DevOps tools, as well as we can modernize Active Directory certificate services. These are kind of what you want to get to. You want to get to a point where you have all the tools available, different methods to deploy certificates within your environment. I will show some of these within the demo itself. So we'll get to that next. Next slide, please. This is a high-level overview of Sectigo Certificate Manager. So as you can see, quite a bit of different Sorry about that. Quite a bit of different integrations on the left-hand side, where you can automate your certificates too. On the right-hand side, you can see DCP automation. These are some of the integrations that Sectigo works with today for managing your DNS. So GoDaddy, Cloudflare, DNS Simple, OVH Cloud, Azure, AWS, Akamai. That's going to be a big problem as we go down to when we have 47-day certificates and 10-day DCV. Who absolutely want to have a process in place to automate. Today we're working with many of your popular DNS providers to handle that for you, and we're going to continue on adding more. But this is kind of the goal that you want to get to, is having a full-fledged CLM with automation for certificate deployment within your environment. Next slide, please. So yeah, once we've mapped everything together, we want to come out with a rollout plan. As you know, Tim and Nick were describing, training is extremely important. So we want to come up with a plan. We want to start training all of our administrators on how we can deploy our certificates. We'll probably want to come up, RACI is a good acronym, Responsible, Accountable, Consulted, Informed template that ensures that roles are clear and people know what they are responsible for. So we want to come up with a rollout plan for this transition from 398 to 200 to 100 days, and then finally those 47-day certificates. All right, next slide, please. And the goal is to get to be crypto agile, to be able to move from key type to key type. As you know, Tim had mentioned, we're on RSA, we have elliptical curve out there, we're going to have quantum safe, and there might be more key types that we just don't even know about yet that we're probably going to need to be able to move to in the future. The best thing that you can do today is get yourself into a certificate lifecycle management tool that is crypto agile, so that you can move from key type to key type with a few clicks, if not even automated, moving from key type to key type. You want to establish a cryptographic center of excellence, so that you can understand that the landscape is changing and you need to be able to adapt when the key type change and industry standards change as well. All right, next slide, please. So we're going to arm you with, this is all completely free, the 47-day toolkit. So we provide assets for all the steps we just described to ensure that your team is prepared for this. So we will send this all to you after this call, and we'll want you to start. And we'll want to, if you have any questions, please reach out to our team, and we will walk you through these steps as well. But this is a good starting guide on how you want to move to a 47-day environment. All right, I think that's it, right, Leah? That's the last slide?
Yeah, that's
perfect.
Time for demos.
So, perfect, come to the demo.
I'll let you share.
So I will first start with one of those free tools that you can go use today to find your certificates, and that's CRT.
Brendan, you're on mute at the moment.
Brendan, you're muted.
I don't know how I got muted there. Sorry about that. Okay,
Yeah.
all right, thank you. Appreciate that. So yeah, I'll go back. So CRT.sh is a free tool that Sectigo has that you can utilize today. Everyone can go to this tool and find the certificates that have been issued through certificate transparency. So if you're not familiar with what certificate transparency is, it's essentially a ledger of all the certificates that public CAs have issued. And there's records of the certificates that every domain and organization have deployed. So then you can utilize these logs to understand what certificates that you have out there. A lot of organizations that I've met with recently, they have many different administrator groups within their environment, and they do not know all the certificates that they're issuing. This is a great first step to find the certificates that you've issued publicly. So what you can do is come into this CRT.sh, you can put in your organization name. You'll probably want to exclude the expired certificates and remove the duplicate pre-certificate pairs. And you will want to go down here and add yourself the organization name. And then you'll get results that look similar to the following. These are all the certificates that Sectigo has issued. We just use that as an example. Everyone can look at this. It's all public record, right? And here we can see all the certificates that are not expired that Sectigo has issued. For certificate authority, we do quite a bit. But yeah, you can utilize this tool today as that kind of that first step for inventory to understand what you have out there today. All right, then we'll get into kind of what many of my customers are doing in Sectigo Certificate Manager. And they're utilizing this tool to see what is going on with their certificate. So the first thing that we're going to show here is the dashboard. And the dashboard is a collection of certificates that have been found directly from Sectigo Certificate Manager discovery tools. I'll show you that in a second. Deployed directly through Sectigo Certificate Manager, and then also you can manually import certificates as well. Here you can see at the top your SSL, your client code signing and device certificates, and then we have a breakdown of your certificates below. Probably most importantly for a lot of people, you want to see expiring certificates. We can see those that are going to expire within 30, 60, 90, and 180 days. But there are other metrics that you want to keep track of as well. For instance, key strength. When Tim was talking about SHA-1, that's really relatively the same time we reduced or removed RSA 1024. And so we can identify potentially problematic certificates that you have. So here's like 2 certificates that are RSA 1024 that hasn't been secure since January of 2014. Now we can identify these potentially problematic certificates and deploy them with a proper one. So it's nice to have inventory of what you have out there, understand what you're what they're doing, and you know, find any problems and remove them. So let's get into certificate discovery through SEM. A couple different methods that we'll go over today. We'll do public and private scanning. So what you'll want to do is come in here, hit the plus button. You can give this a friendly name. So you know, maybe it would just be like a public scan, something of that nature. We'll leave agent at cloud, and then basically have a certificate bucket. If you run a really broad scan, you might find certificate information you don't want to put directly into your CLM. So rather than muddying up the waters with you know, certificate information you don't care about, we put it into a bucket first, and then we move it into different groups. In range as a scan, here you can put in a public CIDR range, public IP or IP range host name, and then the port that you want to scan for. Additionally, you can schedule this. I always recommend customers do at least a weekly scan. Again, we might find certificate information that you did not know about, especially if you're on a really broad scan. It's nice to be identify them, and then you can deploy them with a proper certificate. So I have an example of one that we have done recently. So this is a public scan. We were scanning for docs.sectigo.com as well as sectigo.com. And when we ran the scan, I think we ran it yesterday, we can see the details of what we found. So we found 2 certificates as we might have expected. We can see the Sectigo as well as this docs.sectigo.com certificate. And we've assigned this based on the signer rules, so out of the certificate bucket and into the CLM, so that we can see all the details about the particular certificate. So this docs.sectigo.com certificate was assigned to an organization. We can put them into different organizations and groups. So as you're discovering certificates, you place them into specific groups that makes your life a lot easier going forward. You can see all the certificate information. Everything within a certificate is here. I won't bore you with all the details of within a certificate, but I do want to point out that we do look at serial numbers as unique identifiers for certificate. And most importantly, that first step of discovery and awareness is you want to know where these certificates live. So when we ran this scan, we identified that this docs.sectigo.com certificate was on this IP address and port. And that'll help us understand, what we have out there and how important it is, and eventually go and how we can deploy it with automation. Many customers are still utilizing wildcard certificates. Always try to not recommend placing a wildcard certificate in many different locations. But what's nice about this scan is because we use that serial number as that unique identifier, every single location where that wildcard certificate is at, we will append this list and add those locations as well. This is a single domain certificate. We only expect it to be in one location, but those wildcard certificates that you might utilize, you'll see a complete breakdown of where those wildcard certificates are at. That's how you do a public scan. Additionally, you're going to have internal certificates, and you'll want to do a private scan as well. And so it's very similar to what we had just done, except we have a network agent which gets installed on a Linux or Windows machine, and whatever networks it has access to, then it can go ahead and scan and find the certificates within those networks. So this is an example of one that we're using this IP range, which is a private IP range 192.168. And we're looking for certificates within a private environment. And we did one yesterday as well. And we found 2 certificates that are local in my environment. And now we have identification of the certificate is, where it's at, if it's expired. And then we can, again, plan to replace those certificates with automation. So that initial first phase is that discovery. You'll want to do that planning, mapping it to different environments, and that's where we look at that spider slide of where we can deploy our certificates to. And then it's on to certificate automation. And we'll go ahead and deploy a new certificate today. Let me first show you that we have an insecure certificate. It's an expired certificate, and we're going to go ahead and replace it today. That's what that myth that I was talking about, is that, you know, automation is easy, and we're going to do one on this call live, and we'll see how easy it is. So, with SEM, when you deploy a certificate, we have 4 different options. The first option is that manual option that you're used to, where you generate the CSR, you upload the CSR to a CA, you wait for the CA to validate the certificate, you download the certificate, upload it to the web server, reboot the web service. It's still available for you. That's old and archaic, and we want to replace that. We have another option where we can generate the CSR for you, so that you don't have to worry about OpenSSL. You don't have to worry about going through the Windows GUI any longer. We can just do it directly from here, but you're still manually install the certificate to the end device. That's kind of like that centralized key management, conundrum. The third and fourth option, this is full certificate automation directly into the end device. So we'll do one today on an IIS machine. We can do this for many of your popular web services, cloud services, load balancers, firewalls through here. So we'll do the third option. We'll pick the organization and department that we're deploying our certificate into. So as we deploy certificates, we organize them into those different groups. And then based on these organizations and departments, you get different certificate profiles. And profiles define governance over what you can deploy for. And I'll be through number one, the certificate term. So you can see right now I have a 47-day certificate term. You'll also get to define the domains and subdomains that you can enroll with. You also get to define the key types that you can enroll with. So it's a good tool that you're defining and being crypto agile, because we can remove an old key type, move to a new one in the future, and you will move to that key type automatically. We can see this is a 47-day certificate. 50% of Sectigo customers are doing 90-day certificates or less. So with this tool, you'll have the ability to go down to a shorter certificate. If you start with this March date for 200-day certificates and you're really comfortable with your certificate automation, there's no reason why you can't go to 47-day certificates and make yourself more secure today. You can go even less if you wanted to. So you get to define the certificate term that you want to enroll with. Okay. We're going to go on to the next step. This step, we're going to select the private key. Here you can see, based on the certificate profile that I selected in the first step, we have RSA and elliptical curve. Again, we can define that policy, and we can pick which key types that we do not want to enroll with. Next step is we're going to for a common name. So we'll do that SSL test one, because we want to pick that one. So we'll do ssltest.sectigo.com. In this step, we are checking that the organization and department that you selected for has access to deploy for this domain and subdomain within an environment. Okay. Here's our nodes imports. Our network agent, in this case, is reading all of the different configuration files that it has access to. So here you can see I have an online IIS server and then an online Apache server. And then it reads the configuration files, so you can see the virtual server names, you can see the alias, you can see the port that these websites run on, and then if there's an SSL certificate installed or not. I like that you have a link to the SSL certificate. I can look at this and it can help me determine if I do want, in fact, replace the certificate. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to go and hit this one, and we're going to install this new certificate on the same existing key binding that's out there. Next step is auto installation. We have two options. Most customers are going to do a scheduled option. So we're going to pick a time frame for when they want to install their certificate to. So maybe they want to do it on a Monday night. They can specify a specific time, and they can the certificate and auto renewal of the certificate during that time frame. For our purposes, we'll do a triggered option for the demo, which is an administrator gets an install button and then can install the certificate to the server whenever they feel is best fit. So we'll do that today for demo, but again, most customers are going to do a scheduled installation. And the last step is auto renewal, and this is by far like our customer's favorite step is to turn this switch on, and this is going to automatically renew the certificate 30 days prior to expiration. That might be a bit aggressive once we go down to 47-day certificates, but you do have the option to change it to 10 or 5 or whatever you wanted to put in here. And this is a good box here is to create a new key pair when renewing the certificate. That's pretty much the entire process, except for because we did the triggered option, we'll do the install later on. But what's happening right now is the network agent that Sectigo has talks back to SCM every 60 seconds or so. So once it checks in, it's going to generate the private key pair. It's going to pass the CSR over to SCM. SCM will validate the certificate, and then the validated certificate will go back down to the network agent and sit there ready for install once I click that button. And I want to point out the one thing that's really important there is the private key pair. The private key is the thing that makes you most vulnerable. That's the thing that you need to keep protected. And what's nice about this kind of environment is the private keys always remain in your infrastructure. The only thing that gets passed to Sectigo Certificate Manager is the CSR. And that's by design. It's best security practice for you. It's good for Sectigo. Your private keys stay within your environment. All right, let's see, we can go and view the certificate. We can see now that the certificate was issued. So we can see that the certificate is processing. Actually, let me go back here to the view audit first. I want to point out that every action is logged. So here you can see my user created the request. My user has an auto approval. If you wanted to put in an approval message, you do have that option. We also have change management options as well. Nick and Tim will probably talk about this, at another time. Probably want to avoid, doing change management, especially for every certificate renewal. You might want to do change management to kick off automation, but probably don't want to have somebody every 30 days click a button to install that certificate. So something to think forward to when we go down to 47-day certificates. Yes, we do change management today. It's probably not something we want to do for every certificate renewal in the future. Here you can see my private key was generated. We've issued a certificate from, in this case, the private CA, issued the certificate, and now we're waiting for the certificate to be ready for install. And actually, we can see I refresh here, and the chain is ready to be installed. Let's go ahead and kick it off now. So we'll refresh here, and we'll get an install button to install the certificate directly to the web server. So there's that install button. We can click install on all nodes, and in approximately 60 more seconds, we will install that certificate to that web server. Before I show you the certificate being installed, I want to go into management here. You always have the option to update the certificate. So maybe we want to move the certificate from one location to the next. You have that option directly from here. Maybe you want to install the certificate into multiple locations. It's not recommended based on security practices, but you do have that option. If you want to install a certificate on a web server and a load balancer like an F5 at the same time, you have that option. Try not to do that. Try to have private key pairs for each individual site if you can, but it is available. You also have the ability to change from a trigger to scheduled. So we did trigger today with the install button, but perhaps for my renewals, I want it to be scheduled. I always have that option to update. And then we can change auto renewal. Let's say we want to renew it, 5 days prior, and for 10 days, you can update that here. Or maybe we're going to retire the infrastructure. I can undo the switch, and then I would no longer renew that certificate any longer. So, all right, I'll refresh. We can see it's now installed, and then we can go over to that web server again. And we'll refresh. And here we can see we have a new valid certificate. So the myth of automation is difficult. You can see we've done it live within 5 minutes or so, and we've issued a certificate directly to that web server. So here's our new issue and a new certificate, and it'll expire in 47 days. So that's what you'll want to get to. You want to be able to get to a point where you're having certificates automated, and with a couple clicks, we can update a certificate directly within its environment. And with a CLM, automation is great, but you want to have checks and balances. So if you look at view and we'll go to management and location, as we issue certificates, we know where this certificate belongs. We know it's using this network agent. We know it's on this node and port, and we get proper notifications to when that certificate was installed. If it failed for whatever reason, we get notified for that. And Sectigo Certificate Manager, we can notify you via Slack, MS Teams, or custom webhooks. So this is kind of what you want to move to. This is what you want to thrive to, is to have the ability to deploy certificates directly from an interface, fully automated and set up for full auto renewal. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. Leah, do you want to bring up the slides again?
Yeah, coming back up. And I think we're at the question part, unless I'm wrong, Brendan.
Yep, I think we're ready. Yep.
Great. So we have got a couple. The first question is, how can it be expected that thousands of legacy applications running on old operating systems need to upgrade so that they can use automation?
Yeah, I think this is the point that we were talking about before, which is that you're gonna have to, like, I've had this question come from other people before where they said, well, look, I can't do that. I can't upgrade these things. And my response to that is, well, it's kind of like saying, you know what, I can't get the oil changed in my car. It's too expensive and I don't have time. Well, okay, if your car stops working, then that's going to be worse. And if you think about the idea of a seized engine, maybe you'll decide you actually can change the oil in your car, and that it's worth the time and the expense, and you just got to find a way. And sometimes when I get that question from somebody, it's like they want me to absolve them from making these changes, and that's not for me to do, right? You've got to decide what is going to happen, or what do I think the risk profile is if I don't automate these things, and decide what's it like if I have outages because I can't keep up, and decide what's it like if I have breaches, and what's it like if I have outdated cryptography that gets owned by an APT, and then look at what you need to do to upgrade it, because that that APT isn't going to say, you know what, I get it, life is hard, I'm not going to steal your stuff. They're not going to do that, right? And the calendar isn't going to say, oh, I get it, life is hard, I'm not going to move forward so your certificates don't expire. They're not going to do that. And so we have to face the reality that these changes are coming. We have to be eyes open, and we have to make, mature decisions about what we're going to take on and what we're not. And I have talked to people who have said, listen, I've wanted to get off this legacy stuff for years, and I think this is finally what's going to give me the power to make that happen. Or I've been wanting to automate for years, and I've never been able to secure the budget and the roadmap compared to other initiatives. And now this is going to have the power to make me make that happen. So I will encourage you, as a working IT manager, to think about the opportunity this provides for you to get changes in place where we all kind of knew we were driving without a seatbelt anyway. And this is our chance to get that seatbelt.
Great. Then we have another question. Do you know how companies should manage I'm not sure if it's PIN-ing or pinning, certificates to mobile application when 47-day terms will be achieved?
Nick, you
Yeah,
want to take this one?
Yeah.
I'll take this one. I have a good answer to this one. The answer, and it is certificate pinning, by the way. The answer to that is don't. It's a
Yeah.
fairly simple question. Don't do it. Certificate pinning is something that is not recommended by any public CA. You could say not supported, but obviously it's something a subscriber makes choice to do. But don't do it. Simply do not do it. The reality is certificate pinning is an additional kind of binding to a certificate. If you have a certificate on a website or a web service, your browser or your mobile application will do some standard checks for that certificate. It will check it's the right domain name, it will check it's in the right date, it will check a bunch of things. Pinning is adding additional checks onto that to try and make sure the application expects a particular type of certificate or a particular key or a particular route, for example. All of those things are completely beyond the control of you, the consumer or the enterprise. You cannot guarantee that any CA will be using the same CA or the same routes or will allow you to use the same key for any length of time. Plus, you obviously have this rotation every 47 days as well. So don't do it, is the honest answer. There are alternatives. If you feel you must do certificate pinning, you would need to look at private certificate pinning and distributing root certificates with the application and so forth. Or don't do it at all and look for alternatives to whatever threat model you believe pinning helps. But for public certificates, simply don't do it anymore.
Yeah. Can automation, so auto installation and auto renewal, also take place for client certificates such as SMI?
Yeah, absolutely. Different processes for it, but yes, we can automate certificates directly to the end devices through your popular MDMs like Intune. We have ways to do it through a group policy, and then Sectigo has its own ways through different APIs. So absolutely, we can also automate SMI certificates as well as device certificates and even some code signing certificates. We have full automation for all those certificate types.
Great. And maybe another question for you, Brendan. Does the Sectigo Certificate Manager also detect compromised digital certificates, and can it renew it?
So it depends on the situation, but if it's a known private key pair that or so key type that's is compromised, then yes, then we will notify, or we can say that it won't work. We also can detect those certificates, so you can use the scanning tools to detect if there's weak key types, and through using the dashboard and get notifications for those. But it really just depends on the situation. We'd be happy to talk more about that as well with you.
I'll add one quick thing if I could to that question. So there is well, when you use automation, particularly if you use something like Acme, Acme has an additional capability called ARI, or Automated Renewal Information. And the way that works is the client can actually check with the CA periodically and say, do I need to do something with the certificate? Do I need to get a new one? And so if we know it's compromised, or a CA knows it's compromised, it can then tell your automated client, hey, you need to go and get a new certificate in the next 24 hours, and it will do so. So there are mechanisms that are becoming more popular now that will support this kind of thing about automatic detection and renewal of certificates due to things like compromise. But it's all tied to automation, so obviously you need to get that in place first.
I think too, then adding to that though, the better solution is to have new private key pairs every single time too. And to swap them out. I've seen very little where a customer actually has to keep the same private key. It's something we do today because it's just kind of known practice, or it's just easy. But when you get to a point where you have certificates being automated, there's no reason why you can't swap out that private key every single time.
Thanks. How can we find the owners when running a certificate scan in SCM?
So
Yeah.
we'd be able to identify the different IP addresses and ports. It is a bit of a you have to talk to the different application teams, and that's kind of why that 47-day toolkit that we are providing we'll give you some of those great resources, how to email and how to contact your different team members to inform them what's going on. This is what we think you have, you're in charge of, and we need to come together and kind of fight this fire together. So there's no automated way, because it's just not possible to figure out who the application owner for each certificate is.
Great. Then two questions very similar. Do you have a prediction how the public TLS certificate landscape will look post 2029? Or also, is it possible that the 47-day deadline gets pushed further out?
So yeah, let's put those together and maybe add a third one. But so does the 47-day deadline get pushed out? Possible. Well, for that to happen, what would have to happen is there would have to be a ballot that passed the CA Browser Forum to move that date. And the way that voting works in the CA Browser Forum is there's two bodies. It's kind of like the US Congress. There's a set of CAs, and the CAs have to pass it, and there's a set of browsers, and the browsers have to pass it. And I don't believe the browsers would vote for that, even if the CAs did, short of something really dramatic, some dramatic revelation that we don't have today. So yes, it's possible, but I think it's quite unlikely. And I think if we're going to be responsible about it, we need to make our plans now on the working assumption that that date is not moving. Because depending on that date to move, I think is a dangerous, not even dangerous, a disastrous approach to take. So in the event it does move, then that'll happen. I think it's deeply unlikely, and I think we need to make our plans as if it's not. Another question I get is, okay, well, are we done at 47 days? What's next? And I would say, sure, in a long enough time horizon, we can imagine something that's shorter than 47 days. But 47 days is the initiative now. And when we get there, I think we're going to be pretty happy with that for quite a while. So don't expect that in 2029, we're going to be talking about the next reduction. I think that's going to get us where the web PKI needs to be for the time being. And even think about that. That's a 4-year plan just to get to there, plus 2 more years of discussion. It was 6 years from when the idea was thrown down to when we got to 47 days. And it's going to be 10 years, 9 years between reduction of down to 1 year and reduction down to 47 days. So these are long time horizons. So sure, by 2040, do we have a shorter maximum term? I'm sure we do, but it's not going to be limited and imminent and looming. In terms of the last question, which is, well, what else is going on in the horizon? And feel free to chime in here, Nick, but I think a few things worth noting. Obviously, multi-perspective issuance corroboration, which is how we have to defeat border gateway protocol attacks by looking at your domain from a lot of different places around the world. That is in play now, that is in place, and that is something that's going to increase its footprint. So we're going to look for more and more domains as time goes on. That's one thing that's going to happen. That helps us defeat border gateway protocol attacks. Another thing is the complete deprecation of manual DCV methods. So there's a variety of methods. There's like 8 or so methods, all of which are down to essentially you get sent an email or you receive a phone call, right? And those are going to go away as well, because they're fundamentally insecure and they're extremely spoofable. And that's something that matters a lot. We know a lot of enterprises like those methods because they can have an email, they can watch for the email, they know where it's going. That's not going to work moving forward. First of all, if DCV needs to be done every 10 days. Second of all, what's the multi-perspective version of that? And so for all these reasons, these basically insecure methods are going away. So those are some big changes that are coming for sure. And the exact how and when they take shape might, be a little variable, but those are things you should plan on.
Thanks, Tim. I'm trying to squeeze in one more question, maybe.
Mhm.
Can the certificate manager also integrate with ITSM tools for change management?
Yeah, we can. We work with Jira and we work with ServiceNow. So you can absolutely do change management with these tools with Sectigo Certificate Manager. I do again want to caution you again with change management. It's potentially problematic as we go down to short list certificates. We really need to rethink our policy. Talk to your InfoSec team that, hey, I understand why you're asking for change management. It reduces the risk, but you're actually creating more risk when we're doing short-lived certificates if somebody has to manually do something every 30 days. So yeah, definitely look into changing your policy with that.
Great, and we're coming up to the end of the webinar. So here's the link where you can download the 47-day toolkit. You'll also get an email afterwards about this toolkit and also some additional resources. It's all going to be in the email, the follow-up email. But thank you everyone for your time. Thanks, Nick, Tim, and Brandon. If you've got any more questions, do get in touch with us. Finally, we're doing some in-person 47-day summits as well. And we'd love for you to join us if you're local to Chicago, Toronto, Dallas, London, Paris, or Mumbai. Sounds like a nice world trip. As promised, we'll follow up with the toolkit. Keep an eye on your inbox. But for today, thank you and have a good rest of your day.